I think it's safe to say that change is on my agenda. Change for good. And I embrace that and I enjoy that change. I don't fear it. That's the bit that excites me.
In this video, we are diving into a question that just a few months ago would have seemed completely unthinkable. Should King Charles abdicate the throne? Should he step down and make way for Prince William and Princess Catherine to take over and potentially save the British monarchy from what many are now calling its biggest crisis in modern history? And what is fueling all of this? A scandal so deep, so damaging, that questions are reportedly being asked not just in the media, not just among the public, but behind closed doors at Buckingham Palace itself. So stay with me through this entire video because by the end, I am going to ask you a question that I genuinely want your answer to in the comments below. Let us start with the background because you need to understand exactly how we got here. Prince Andrew, the Duke of York, King Charles's younger brother, is at the center of a storm that has been building for years but has now reached a point of absolute crisis. Virginia Giuffre, one of the alleged victims connected to the Jeffrey Epstein trafficking network, has made serious accusations against Prince Andrew. Now, what makes this even more explosive is that according to multiple credible reports, including from publications like The Telegraph, the £12 million settlement paid to Virginia Giuffre did not come from one single purse. There are claims, serious claims, that approximately £1.5 million of King Charles's own money was used as part of that settlement. And if that is true, then this is no longer just Andrew's problem. This becomes a problem that touches the very top of the British monarchy. Now I know what some of you might be thinking. This is left-wing media. This is people who have always wanted to bring down the royal family. This is political opportunism, dressed up as moral outrage. And look, I hear that argument. But here is the thing. When the New Statesman magazine, one of Britain's most respected political publications, runs a cover image titled The Crumbling House of Windsor, when conversations are happening across dinner tables and in pubs across Britain that would have been considered radical just weeks ago, when even people who deeply respect the institution of the monarchy are starting to ask hard questions, then we are in genuinely new and dangerous territory for the crown. This is not noise. This is a signal. So the debate that is being had right now, and it is a fierce one, is this. Should King Charles abdicate, use whatever reason necessary, whether it is the Andrew scandal, whether it is his health, whether it is simply the good of the institution, and step aside for William and Catherine, or should he stay, ride this out, and trust that the monarchy, as it has done so many times before throughout history, will survive? There are two very strong schools of thought on this, and I want to walk you through both of them honestly and fairly, because this is not a simple question, and anyone who tells you it is a simple question is not thinking carefully enough. The case for Charles staying on the throne is actually quite compelling when you lay it out properly. First, let us talk about precedent. Abdication in the British constitutional system is not something that happens routinely. It is not a mechanism that is built into the system as a normal response to crisis. The only time it happened in modern history was in 1936, when Edward VIII stepped down, and let us be very clear about what that moment actually was. That was not a clean, tidy damage control exercise that made everything better. That was a moment of enormous constitutional upheaval, political volatility, and institutional uncertainty. The argument that Charles should abdicate because it worked for the monarchy in 1936 fundamentally misreads what actually happened in 1936. Edward's abdication was not a stabilizing event, it was a destabilizing one that the monarchy survived in spite of, not because of. Second, and this is important, the polling does not support the idea that the British public want Charles gone or that they want the monarchy abolished. Only a small minority of people in Britain are actually calling for the abolition of the monarchy. The overwhelming majority of British people believe the monarchy will still be there in 10 years. They believe it will still be there in 20 years. Now, that does not mean they are thrilled with how things are being handled. It does not mean they approve of Andrew's behavior or of the hush money. But it does mean that the public, in their wisdom, are drawing a distinction between the institution and the individual. They are not holding King Charles personally responsible for the actions of his brother in the same way that you would not hold a parent legally or institutionally responsible for the crimes of an adult sibling. Third, and I think this point gets overlooked in all of the heat and emotion of this debate, King Charles is actually doing things. He stripped Andrew of all his royal titles. He removed Andrew from royal duties. He effectively exiled him to Norfolk, away from the spotlight, away from international travel, away from the kind of influence Andrew might otherwise be able to use to get himself out of trouble. There are reports suggesting that Charles is actually trying to keep Andrew in the country specifically to ensure that if the law does come for him, it will be able to reach him. Andrew apparently has a palace available to him in Abu Dhabi. He would quite happily disappear to the Middle East where none of this matters, and where he would face no legal consequences whatsoever. Charles keeping him here, in cold wind-swept Norfolk, is actually a move designed to preserve the possibility of justice, not obstruct it. And then there is the constitutional argument, which is perhaps the most powerful of all. The British monarchy is not a political office. You cannot get rid of the king the way you get rid of a prime minister who loses a vote of no confidence. The system does not work that way, and for very good reasons. The monarchy derives its power and its legitimacy from hereditary succession. The moment you start treating the monarchy like a popularity contest, the moment you say this king must go because the media and the public are angry, you have fundamentally changed what the monarchy is. You have turned it from a constitutional institution that provides stability and continuity into just another political game, and once you do that, you cannot undo it. Every future monarch becomes vulnerable to being removed whenever they become unpopular. That is not stability. That is a different kind of chaos. Now let us look at the other side. Because the case for Charles stepping down is also genuinely powerful, and it deserves to be taken seriously. The argument begins not with constitutional theory, but with something much more human. If you are a parent, and someone comes to you and says, "I need £12,000, or in Charles's case, a contribution toward a £12 million settlement, do you just write the check without asking any questions? Without understanding what it is for? Without having a family conversation about the implications? The suggestion that money of that scale, including potentially funds from Charles himself, moved around without Charles having some awareness of what was happening, that strains credibility. And if Charles did know, even in broad terms, what the settlement was about, then his position becomes much more complicated. Because then the question is not just about Andrew. The question is about Charles's own judgment, his own complicity by inaction, his own choice to make a problem go away rather than confront it. And this connects to a broader critique of Charles's approach to crisis management. When Andrew was arrested, when the Epstein files were released, when Virginia Giuffre's claims became front-page news around the world, what did Charles do? He issued a statement. He handed Andrew over to the police, as he put it. He drew a line and said, "This is no longer my problem." And for many people, that response felt inadequate. It felt cold. It felt like a man protecting an institution rather than a person leading one. The public do not just want to be managed. They want to be spoken to. They want transparency. They want a king who looks them in the eye and says, "Here is what happened, here is what I knew, here is what I did, and here is what I am going to do about it." And that communication has been largely absent. There is also the matter of Charles's health. He is fighting cancer. He is undergoing regular treatment. He is not a young man, and he is carrying an enormous burden. Not just the Andrew scandal, but also the fracture with Harry and Meghan, the complexity of managing a modern monarchy in a social media age, and the physical toll of his illness. Is it fair to ask a man in that condition to be the public face of a national institution through what may be the most damaging scandal the monarchy has faced since the death of Diana? And is it fair to Prince William and Catherine, who by virtually every metric are the most popular members of the royal family, to make them wait on the sidelines while the institution they are meant to inherit takes hit after hit? Here is something worth sitting with. The comparison being made is to Edward VII's abdication in 1936 and the Second Elizabethan era that followed it. The argument is that sometimes clearing out the old makes room for something genuinely transformational. Elizabeth II's reign became one of the most celebrated in British history, in part because the slate had been wiped clean. William and Catherine represent something similar, a generational reset, a fresh start, a monarchy that can reconnect with a public that is rapidly losing faith in what it is currently seeing. But, and this is a critical but, there is a difference between making a good argument for change and actually making change happen in a way that does not cause more damage than it prevents. If Charles were to abdicate right now, in the middle of this crisis, under this kind of pressure, it would not look like dignified leadership. It would look like a collapse. It would look like the monarchy bending to media pressure and public anger. And that sets a precedent that is deeply dangerous for the long-term health of the institution. It says to the world, if you apply enough pressure, if you run enough negative front pages, if you generate enough public outrage, you can remove a British monarch. That is not a precedent any serious defender of the monarchy should want to set. And then there is the question of what we actually know versus what we assume. A lot of what is being said right now is being said from hindsight. At the time the settlement with Virginia Giuffre was reached, the full extent of the Epstein network had not been revealed publicly. The palace, like many institutions, had been given reason to doubt her account at certain points. Andrew told his family it would be fine, that the Newsnight interview had gone well, that things would blow over. He misled the people closest to him. He misled his mother. He misled his brother. The benefit of the doubt was extended to him, and he abused that trust catastrophically. That is a moral failing that belongs to Andrew, not to Charles. None of this means Charles is without fault. None of this means the monarchy should not change, should not modernize, should not become more transparent about its finances, its decisions, and its processes. The era of never complain, never explain is genuinely over. It simply cannot survive in a world where social media, investigative journalism, and public accountability culture are what they are. The monarchy has to adapt. But adaptation is not the same as collapse. Reform is not the same as removal. The institution can emerge from this stronger, leaner, more transparent, and more connected to the people it serves. But only if it manages this crisis with strategic intelligence rather than panic. What makes this moment so genuinely complicated, and why this debate matters beyond just British politics, is that it touches on something universal. What do we owe institutions? How much grace do we extend to leaders who are not personally guilty, but who are connected to those who are? When does staying become an act of responsibility, and when does it become an act of stubbornness? These are not just questions for Britain. These are questions that play out in governments, in corporations, in families, all over the world. What is clear is this: the monarchy is at a crossroads. The choices made in the coming months by Charles, by William, by the institution's advisors, by the media, and yes, by the public, will shape what the British monarchy looks like for the next generation. The most popular royals in living memory are standing ready. The public patience, while not yet exhausted, is being tested in ways it has not been tested before. And the man at the top is a king who waited his entire life for this role, who genuinely cares about this country, who has done real and meaningful work on homelessness, the environment, interfaith dialogue, and youth opportunity, and who is now fighting cancer while his brother's catastrophic choices threaten to define his reign. History will be the judge of what comes next. But what we do know is that silence, deflection, and institutional arrogance will not save this monarchy. Only genuine transparency, real accountability, and authentic communication with the British people will. Whether Charles is the one to deliver that, or whether William and Catherine will need to be the ones to rebuild. That is the question that Buckingham Palace is wrestling with right now. So here is where I want to leave you. We have laid out both sides of this debate as honestly and completely as we can. There are serious, intelligent, well-informed people on both sides. This is not a simple question with a simple answer. But here is what I want you to think about. If you were advising King Charles right now, not as a Republican, not as a monarchist, but simply as someone who wants the best outcome for Britain and for the institution, what would you tell him to do? Should he stay and fight? Should he step aside with dignity for the good of the crown? Or is there a third path, a middle ground where he remains king, but radically transforms how the monarchy operates and communicates? I want to know what you think. Leave your answer in the comments below, because this is exactly the kind of conversation that deserves more than just headlines. Before you go, if you found this breakdown valuable, please hit the like button right now. It takes 2 seconds and it genuinely helps this channel reach more people who care about real, in-depth analysis. Subscribe if you are not already subscribed, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a video. We cover the stories that matter, in the depth they deserve, without the spin. Share this video with someone who has been following this story, because the more people who are genuinely informed about what is happening, the better the conversation we can all have. Thank you for watching. Now go leave that comment. I will be reading every single one.